Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Southern Gal True Crime. I share missing persons, cold cases, true crime news, and more. And today it's Monday, so it is our Missing Person Monday video for the week. And this week I'm featuring 6 cold cases from Missouri. Let me change my layout so you can see. First, we have Geneva Adams. Geneva has been missing since July 25th, 1976, from Herculaneum, Missouri. She is classified as endangered missing. She's a white female. She was 53 years old at the time she went missing. If she were still alive today, she would be 101. At the time she went missing, she was 5 foot to 5 foot 2 inches tall, 110 to 120 pounds. She was last seen wearing a blue tank top with a design on the front, blue pants made of thin material, and possibly a ring with 2 green heart-shaped stones. She had brown hair and brown hazel eyes, and she may have a scar on her abdomen from gallbladder surgery. So Geneva was last seen at the Artesian Lounge in Herculaneum, Missouri on July 25th, 1976. She asked her daughter to drive her there so she could meet Jimmy Lee Mills. And I believe I did include that smaller picture on the slide is Jimmy Lee Mills. He was a man that she'd met earlier. He was a regular patron of that bar. And at the bar, Adams danced with Mills, and she appeared to be very happy, it says. And then Mills offered to drive her home. After that, she's never been seen or heard from again. Mills later said they left at closing time. He said they went to an after-hours bar in East St. Louis, Missouri, but it was closed, and he dropped her off at a donut shop on Highway 61 in Crystal City, Missouri at around 4 a.m. So a little bit of background information on Jimmy Lee Mills. He was convicted of attempted SA, and he was released from prison in 1975. So that was a year before Geneva went missing. At the time she went missing, he was out on bail. He was awaiting trial for the SA of a teenage girl. He was convicted and received probation and a suspended sentence in that case. He had later convictions for receiving stolen property, escape, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. Another woman associated with Mills is 21-year-old Cynthia Horan. She disappeared from her St. Louis, Missouri apartment in July of 1985. So Horan, when she disappeared, lived next door to Jimmy Lee Mills, and he was investigated as a possible suspect in her disappearance, but there was insufficient evidence to charge him. So Cynthia Horan's remains were found in a shallow grave in Jefferson County, Missouri in 1988, but they weren't identified until 2011. No one has been charged in her case. Jimmy Lee Mills maintains his innocence in Adams' disappearance and says he has no idea what happened to her. He is currently in prison, or as of this information from the Charley Project, he was in prison. He was scheduled to be released in 2019. Geneva was born and raised in Arkansas. She lived in Festus, Missouri at the time of her disappearance. She has 10 children, 2 of whom were still living at home at the time of her disappearance. It says she was a devoted member of the Pentecostal church. She was married twice. Her first husband passed away in 1969, and her second marriage ended in divorce. It says she did not drink much, and it was uncharacteristic of her to go to bars as she did on the night of her disappearance. Her case remains unsolved, and foul play is suspected. So if you have any information on Geneva or her case, call the Herculaneum Police Department at 636-797-5562 or 636-479-4791. And I do have I did find an article with some additional information, interview with her son, and this is from July of 2020, so just about 4 years ago. And it says, it was out of character for 53-year-old Geneva Adams to just hang out at a bar, but she left to dance, so that's just what she did on the evening of July 24th, 1976, the night she disappeared. Geneva was a religious woman, a devoted member of the Pentecostal church, who worked tirelessly her entire life raising 10 children in the working class area of Festus, Missouri, taking jobs in factories and nursing homes. Her first husband, the father of her children, passed away of cancer in 1969, and a brief second marriage ended in divorce. Geneva did not drink, but since she liked to dance, she asked her daughter Sheila, who was in her 20s at the time, to drive her to the Artesian Lounge in Herculaneum, Missouri, that Saturday night for an evening of dancing. Her son, Steve Crump, who was 17 years old at the time, was getting ready to go to his job at a local restaurant. Steve and his 12-year-old brother Billy were the only children still living at home. The other children were grown and had started their own families. Steve still remembers his mother's mood as she left for the bar that night. He says, I hadn't seen my mom that happy in a long time. She didn't drink, but she left to dance and was excited about going out. Steve told Dateline he felt his mother had been lonely since the death of her first husband and following her divorce. He went on to say she really deserved to have a good night out. It was really nice to see her so happy. But the next morning, Steve woke up to a silent house, and he knew something was wrong. I thought it was strange because our mom was always there to make us breakfast, and there was always coffee being brewed when we woke up in the mornings, but that morning, nothing. After discovering that his mother had not slept in her bed that night, Steve called his sister Sheila, who had gone dancing with her. Sheila told Steve that at some point during the night, she decided she wanted to go home. Her mother wanted to stay and continue dancing with a man she had met earlier in the evening, and that man, Jimmy Lee Mills, offered to take her home, and Sheila left. Steve said at that point they began to panic, and along with a few of his siblings, tried to track down the man who had been with their mother. Steve told Dateline that bartenders at the Artesian Lounge told him that his mother had been with a regular named Jimmy Lee Mills and that they left around 1 a.m. Steve said he later discovered that Mills was his little brother Billy's school bus driver in Festus. So there's a little bit of a connection there, in my opinion. As soon as we figured out who it was, we found out where he lived and went over to his trailer and demanded to know where our mother was, Steve said. Steve said Mills told them that he and Geneva left the Artesian Lounge and drove to another bar that was open late in East St. Louis near Illinois. He said he then dropped Geneva off at a donut shop around 4 a.m. in Crystal City, Missouri. Steve said, why would he drop her off at a donut shop in the middle of the night? It makes no sense. I agree with that. The family filed a missing persons report with the Herculaneum Police Department, and according to Chief Mark Togetsky, police at the time were told the same story by Mills. The chief who took the case on 15 years ago told Dateline that Mills was questioned repeatedly but insisted he did not know anything. Jimmy Mills quickly became a person of interest in Geneva's disappearance, the chief confirmed. Jimmy Mills has always been and still is our number one person of interest in this case, Chief Togetsky said, but without a body, we have not been able to charge him. The chief told Dateline Mills has an extensive criminal record, including charges of SA and robbery, like we talked about earlier. The chief said he also believes Mills is responsible for the deaths of multiple women. According to reports confirmed by Chief Togetsky, Mills was charged in the SA of a hitchhiker in Jefferson County 5 weeks before Geneva disappeared. He was out on bail when he met Geneva at the bar. Dude, you're gonna Sorry, my cats were running amok. Um, so rewind. According to reports confirmed by Chief Tolgetsky, Mills was charged in the SA of a hitchhiker in Jefferson County 5 weeks before Geneva disappeared, and he was out on bail when he met Geneva at the bar. 9 years later, in July of 1985, another woman with a connection to Mills disappeared. Chief Tolgetsky told Dateline. Cynthia Horan, 21, lived in an apartment building in St. Louis and shared a kitchen and bathroom with Mills. Investigators turned their attention to Mills, but after being questioned, the chief said there was not enough evidence to charge him with anything. On July 30th, 1988, a hiker in Jefferson County stumbled upon a shallow grave containing the skeleton of a young woman, according to Chief Tolgetsky. A forensic anthropologist built a clay model of the woman's face and determined it to be a woman named Julie Adams, who had been missing from St. Louis since March of 1988. But her family wasn't convinced it was her, and neither were the police. In 2009, Chief Tolgetsky, who was a captain on the force at the time, along with St. Louis homicide detective Randy Sassinger and Jefferson County Sheriff's Lieutenant Eugene Doc Coombs, decided to test their theory that the remains really belonged to Cynthia by comparing DNA from the remains with a saliva sample from Cynthia's brother. It was a match, and her remains were returned to her family for a proper burial. Julie Adams is still missing, the chief said. Geneva's son Steve, who is now 61, has been doing his own research on the case and holds on to every bit of information chronicling his mother's case. He told Dateline that Cynthia Horan's story gives him hope that his mother's case will one day be solved. He says it's been a roller coaster ride, just 44 years of ups and downs. Something happens and you have hope, but then you're let down again. It's very tough. In 2018, police received some information in what they say has been the biggest break in the case yet. According to Chief Tolgetsky, the body of an unidentified Jane Doe had been found in September of 1976 in a wooded area of Washington Park, Illinois. He says that area is near where Jimmy Mills said they were going that night Geneva disappeared. Bars stayed open much later over there. The body was examined at that time, but it was too decomposed to identify a COD, the chief told Dateline. Chief Tolgetsky said Jane Doe was buried in a private cemetery off a residential road in Fairview Heights and forgotten until 2014, when an Illinois State Police sergeant working to identify cold case remains ran Jane Doe's information through the National Missing and Unidentified or NamUs system and came across Geneva's case. Steve told Dateline he's stumped on how the connection was not made before now. Chief Tolgetsky explained to Dateline that missing person cases were handled differently back then and that there was less communication between agencies. Investigators were able to obtain crime scene photos and limited records on where Jane Doe might have been buried, but the chief said all other evidence on her case, unfortunately, was gone. According to the records, Jane Doe had dentures, reddish-brown hair, and a small frame. So that matches up. I don't know about the dentures, but the general description would fairly close, in my opinion. Steve says it's mom, who told Dateline he was able to view photos from the massive file that contains his mother's case. He says, I just know it. I believe that's her. So in December of 2018, authorities obtained an order to exhume the body from where records indicated Jane Doe had been buried in Greenwood Cemetery, but they came up with nothing. Steve was once again crushed with disappointment. It's so frustrating, Steve said. It's like you're reading a book and the last chapter is missing. Chief Tolgetsky said he believes the answers to Geneva's case are in that cemetery, but said the records are clearly wrong on where the body is, and authorities don't plan to dig at this time. I'm 99% sure that Geneva is buried in that cemetery, Chief Tolgetsky said, but without a better lead on where her body is, we just can't dig up the entire area. He added that if the body of Jane Doe is found and identified as Geneva, it would give her family closure. We have been working on this a long time, and I want nothing more than to give this family closure and peace, Tolgetsky said. But he said that would not necessarily lead to a prosecution. We suspect foul play, but at the time the body was found, it was too decomposed to determine a COD. At this point, the best we can hope for is a confession or for someone to come forward with information about what happened that night. The person of interest in Geneva's disappearance, Jimmy Mills, who is now in his 70s, was sent to prison on weapons charges in 2010. Chief Tolgetsky told Dateline Mills was interviewed multiple times while incarcerated, but refused to talk about that night in 1976. Mills was released in August of 2019, and Chief Tolgetsky said they do not know where he now resides. The chief said, we keep hitting dead ends, but we want to solve this case. Our hope now is for someone to come forward, someone with information about that night or about where this body could be buried. Geneva's son, Steve, continues to push on with his search for answers in his mother's case, and he is writing a book that he hopes will tell her story. I want to keep her story alive, Steve said, for her and for her family. Out of us 10 kids, only 6 of us are left, but we don't want our mother's story forgotten. We make sure to tell our children and grandchildren it's not over until we find out the last chapter of her story. At the time of her disappearance, once again, Geneva was described as being approximately 5 foot to 5 foot 2 inches tall, 110 to 120 pounds, with reddish brown hair and brown eyes. She was last seen wearing a blue tank top with a design on the front and blue pants made of a thin material. And anyone with information about Geneva's case is asked to call the Herculaneum Police Department at 636-479-4791. Next, we have Gary Wayne Akers. Gary went missing on December 11th, 1988 from Union, Missouri. He's a white male. He was 35 years old at the time he disappeared. He will be 71 years old now. At the time he disappeared, he was 5'7", 160 pounds, with brown hair and blue eyes, and he says he may go by his middle name of Wayne. So Gary was last seen in Union, Missouri on December 11th, 1988. He left home at 11:30 p.m. to borrow a chainsaw from a neighbor so he could cut wood for his family's wood stove. At midnight, he bought a 6-pack of beer at Mom's Hilltop Tavern in Groveville, Missouri. He never returned home, and he has never been heard from again. At 8 a.m. on December 12th, Akers' wife of 11 years found his black Jeep abandoned just off Route FF at the entrance to the subdivision where they lived with their 4 children. 4 cans of beer were inside the vehicle, and the keys were hidden above the sun visor. A search of the area turned up no signs of violence and no indication of Akers' whereabouts. Authorities believe Akers could have been the victim of foul play. He was involved with some illegal substances at the time of his disappearance, something his wife, they said, was completely unaware of. He had been threatened prior to his disappearance, and after he went missing, his wife had to move because she was getting threatening phone calls. Akers worked the night shift on the assembly line at the Ford Motor Company in Hazelwood at the time of his disappearance. He had purchased Christmas presents for his children the day that he went missing, and his wife does not believe he would have abandoned the family. His brother and sister-in-law think he's no longer alive, and his case remains unsolved. So if you have any information regarding Gary Wayne Akers, contact the Franklin County Sheriff's Department at 636-583-2560. Next, we have Betty L. Alexander. And Betty has been missing since April 10th of 2019 from Sullivan, Missouri. She's a white female. She was 69 years old at the time she disappeared. She will be 74 years old today. At the time she disappeared, she was 4'11" and 150 pounds. She was in the early stages of dementia at the time of her disappearance, and she needed medication, which she did not have with her. And she also used the Finney, I don't know if I can say the whole word on YouTube, so I'll just say the F patches at that time to control back pain. She had brown hair and gray eyes. She had blonde highlights in her hair at the time of her disappearance. Her ears are pierced, and she had rods and screws implanted in her back. Betty was last seen in Sullivan, Missouri on April 10th, 2019. Her neighbor saw her gardening that afternoon, and the medication she was supposed to take at 7 p.m. was apparently taken, since it was not found in her home later. She is believed to have disappeared sometime between 7 p.m. on April 10th and the morning of April 11th. She did not take her 7 a.m. doses of medication, and she has never been seen or heard from since then. When her daughter stopped by her apartment on South Center Street on April 14th, the door was locked. She unlocked it and went inside and could not find her mother, but did see her Meals on Wheels delivery sitting on the table with milk. The only possible indication of a struggle was a scratch on the glass of the screen door. Betty's glasses were on the recliner, and her purse containing her wallet, medications, and her state ID card was in the closet. Inside her purse was $200 in cash, $100 each in 2 envelopes. And her daughter says she does not know where that would have came from, as she, the daughter, handled her mother's finances and paid all her bills since Betty's husband's death. Betty's keys were also in the apartment, but one item was missing, one of 2 boxes of the F patches, which had been delivered on April 10th. Alexander used the patches for back pain, and the other box of patches was in the apartment. So Betty's daughter stated that her mother did not drive or go for walks and did not know how to use a computer or a cell phone. An extensive search of the area turned up no sign of her, and her case remains unsolved. So if you have any information regarding Betty's case, please call the Sullivan Police Department at 573-468-8001. And I do have an article with some additional information, an interview with her family. And this is from April of 2023. The family of a Missouri woman is still hoping someone knows what happened to Betty. Tanya Miller gave an interview to 5 on Your Side the day after the 4-year anniversary. Her family is no closer to knowing what happened to her mother, 72-year-old Betty Alexander. Alexander disappeared from her Sullivan, Missouri apartment without a trace April 10th, 2019. Betty is a white woman who would now be 73 years old. She was again 4'11", 145 pounds, with dark brown hair, with blonde highlights and blue eyes. It's been a long search for answers. She was last seen at her apartment complex. Sorry, everything keeps jumping on me. She was last seen at her apartment complex April 10th. That was the last time anyone had spoken to her, Miller said. Miller recalled the events of that day. She said the cleaning employee came in and said her mother was in good spirits. Her neighbor had seen her working in her garden. The last seen was that afternoon. She took her medication that night at 7 because it wasn't there. The following day, that medication was still there, Miller said. Miller's glasses were left on the arm of the couch. That's the thing that really bothers me. She did not go anywhere without putting her glasses on. It makes me believe something happened. She didn't get up and go anywhere, Miller said with tears in her eyes. Alexander's purse and keys were also found in the apartment, but her daughter said there was one item missing, the box of the patches we talked about earlier, and the box had just been delivered, was not located in her apartment. Miller noted that her mom used the patches for the back pain. She also noticed there was an extra $200 in her purse, and they can't. Sorry, my connection is giving out. 1 second. Let me go back to the right slide. I believe that is the right one. All right, I shall continue. Okay. There was a scratch on the glass of the screen door, as if maybe there was a struggle at the door. Somebody had to see something. It's too small of a town. People don't just vanish. She didn't drive. She didn't go for walks. She could not operate a cell phone or computer, Miller said. Within the last few months, the Missouri State Highway Patrol stepped in to help with the case. The group did a search of the area near the apartment, but left empty-handed. As for the main detective dedicated to the case, he recently retired. Miller shared with a quavering voice, "It's kind of left me feeling alone. He knew the whole case. I'm worried it will get lost." In the last few days, she's reached out to 2 different FBI offices and shared flyers in the town, 68 miles from downtown St. Louis. It just feels like we can't get anyone to help on our case. I'm afraid it's going to become cold and we'll never have answers. There are so many milestones. Mom is missing, she said. I know after 4 years, we probably don't have any chance of getting the good news, but I have to still hope for a miracle. I know they do happen. I know there is a chance. A Facebook page, Bring Betty Home, shares updates and works to keep her case top of mind. And if I remember, I will try to link that in that Facebook page in the description box. Her daughter goes on to say, since you have been missing, our lives have been crushed by so much heartache from not having you here with us and not knowing if you are okay somewhere or not. Read a post from Monday. We keep a chair open for you every holiday. There were some tips that came in, but those calls happen less often now. Miller is now waiting for someone to come forward with new information that could crack the case open. Miller told Five on Your Side she believes even if it's something small, you guys know I'm always saying that, smallest thing could be significant. She says even if it's something small, it is a clue that could give them closure. So once again, anyone with information on the whereabouts of Betty, any information about her case, her disappearance, is asked to call the Sullivan Police Department at 573-468-8001. And there is, as of 2023, there was a $20,000 reward for anyone with information that helps find Betty. This is Rebecca Jane Alsup. Rebecca went missing on February 15th of 2017 from Williamsville, Missouri. She's a white female. She was 34 years old at the time she disappeared. She will be 42 years old today. At the time she disappeared, she was 4'7" and 95 pounds, so very very tiny lady. She did have a heart condition. She had multiple heart operations. She wore a pacemaker, and she needed daily medication to survive. She had brown hair and brown eyes. Both of her legs were amputated. Her listed height and weight are post amputation, so that explains that. She used both a wheelchair and a prosthetic legs for mobility. Her ears were pierced. Her nickname is Becky, and some agencies refer to her as Rebecca Alsop Wood. So Rebecca was last seen in Williamsville, Missouri on February 17th, 2017. A friend came to visit her at her home at 1 p.m. that day to check on her. She lived with her husband, Craig Allen Wood, which I did put the smaller inset picture on the slide is Craig Allen Wood. They lived in a camping trailer on Wood's parents' property. So, I guess this is from the Charley Project. Apparently, when this friend came over to check on her, she said that Rebecca was, quote, freaking out and shaking, and said her husband, Craig Allen Wood, had stolen money from her and cut up the SIM card on her cell phone. She showed her friend the destroyed SIM card as well as some bruises on her left cheek and arm, and stated that Wood had pulled her off the bed by her hair. She borrowed her friend's phone. She called someone and told that person that her husband had stolen money from her and that she was very scared. Later on the evening of February 17th, a man came over to the home and saw Rebecca and Craig Allen Wood there. He came back the next day, and Rebecca was gone, but he noticed her walker in the burn barrel still burning. Get your red flags ready. And Rebecca has never been heard from again. According to numerous witnesses, Wood and Rebecca's relationship is described as stormy. On an unspecified date around the time of her disappearance, Rebecca spoke to one witness on the phone and said Wood had been caught with illegal substances and wanted Rebecca to become an informant, and that he had threatened to take her life if she didn't do so. She asked the witness to come and get her, but by the time the witness arrived at Rebecca's home, he could not find her. There's a lot to unpack in this case. The witness stated that he had heard his own son, who had been around Rebecca when she went missing. So, according to this witness's son, he said when she went missing, she was forced by, the witness's son, sorry, sort of confusing here. So the witness stated he had heard his own son, who had been around Rebecca when she went missing, was forced by Craig Allen Wood to help dispose of her body. So they're saying this witness said his son allegedly was forced by Rebecca's husband to help dispose of her body. So when police interviewed the witness's son, he said different individuals whom he refused to identify had used his car, and when they returned it, there was blood and hair inside it. And shortly afterwards, he cleaned and sold the car. So now the son is saying, when questioned by police, that he was not forced to dispose of the body, but certain individuals, and I'm using air quotes because you can't see me. So he just said certain individuals had borrowed the car. He didn't have anything to do with it. When they returned it, there was blood and hair in it, and all he did was clean the car. So that's his story, and he's sticking to it. So shortly afterwards, he cleaned and sold the car. When police located the person who bought the car, the buyer said it was, quote, extremely clean at the time of purchase. Now, the buyer used the car for a while, but sold it to a scrapyard after it stopped working, and the scrapyard crushed it and it was destroyed. Another witness stated that in 2016, Wood offered him 3 cars, a motorcycle, and half of Rebecca's life insurance policy if he would GSW her. Wood asked the witness what would happen if quote, bong, B-O-N-G, water from a substance pipe was injected into Rebecca's legs. And the witness replied that he thought this would eventually cause her to pass away. Oh, goodness gracious. This one's crazy. Um, he saw Wood with some bottles filled with bong water, and not long after this conversation took place, Rebecca was admitted to the hospital and both of her legs were amputated. So that's very interesting. While she was in the hospital, Wood attempted to have her removed from life support. The hospital refused to comply as they knew this was against Rebecca's wishes, and Wood could not prove at the time that he was her legal husband. After the amputation of her legs, Wood told the witness that he had gotten Rebecca high on substances and injected her with this bong water, but quote, it didn't kill the B word. He told the witness there were many places he could hide Rebecca's body where it would never be found. Another witness who had shared a jail cell with Wood said that he saw him sitting on his bunk one night crying about how he should not have taken the life of quote Becky. In July of 2019, Wood was charged with first-degree homicide and first-degree assault in Rebecca's case. The assault charge was for the 2016 water injection. And according to court documents, police believe that Wood did take the life of Rebecca by striking her in the head with an ashtray. In September of 2019, the charges were dismissed at the request of the prosecution. The prosecution stated they did not have enough evidence. We've heard that story so many times in these cases, but they plan to refile charges at a later date. Foul play is suspected in Rebecca's disappearance due to the circumstances involved, and her body has never been found. And I did try to find an update of any information after 2019, if any charges were filed against Mr. Wood, but I could not find the last article, or the latest article I could find was where he was arrested and charged, and then where the charges were dismissed. But if you have any information in Rebecca's case, please call the Wayne County Sheriff's Office at 573-224-3219. Next, we have Stephen G. Aaliyah. Stephen went missing on January 30th, 1992 from Kansas City, Missouri. He is a white male. He was 30 years old at the time he disappeared. He would be 63 years old today. At the time he disappeared, he was 6'2" and 180 pounds. He had a heart monitor and an internal pacemaker. He had a severe heart condition and required medicine on a daily basis. He did not have the medication with him when he disappeared. Says he was depressed over his health at the time that he disappeared. He had brown hair and blue eyes, and he had surgical scars from 2 heart operations. So Stephen was last seen leaving his home in the vicinity of 103rd Street and Hillcrest Road in Kansas City, Missouri at 8:30 a.m. on January 30th, 1992. He carried a large amount of cash with him at the time. He told a neighbor that he was going to Lamar, Missouri to meet someone at about around 1:30 p.m., but would be back home by 6:30 p.m. Stephen did not return home. He has never been heard from again. He may have traveled to Siloam Springs, Arkansas after his disappearance. His green 1990 Honda Accord LX was found abandoned in a motel parking lot in Fayetteville, Arkansas on November 1st, 1992, which was 10 months after his disappearance. Authorities said it had been there for at least a month, and there was no sign of Stephen near the vehicle. A foul play is suspected in his disappearance. He left all his medication and personal property behind at his home. He was close to his family and stayed in regular contact with them, but they have not heard from him since January of 1992, and his case remains unsolved. And I did look for any additional information, any articles, or any updates in his case. I could not find any. But if you have any information regarding this case, contact the Kansas City Police Department at 816-234-5136. And I believe this is our last one. This is Cherie Nicole Barnes. She is the youngest. She went missing on December 1st, 1986, from St. Louis, Missouri. She was biracial, a black-white female. She was just 2 years old at the time she disappeared. She will be 39 years old today, and the smaller inset picture is an age progression photo to age 32. Her height and weight when she went missing are unknown. She had brown hair and brown eyes. So Cherie's mother and stepfather, Elizabeth Ann Turek Vassar and Larry Vassar, had custody of Cherie in 1986. They moved from Nashville, Tennessee to St. Louis, Missouri that year. Elizabeth, who is also known as Sissy, disappeared from their home in St. Louis on December 1st, 1986. She was discovered in the Mississippi River over 2 months later in February of 1987 as the victim of a homicide, but there was no trace of Cherie at the scene. Authorities do know that Elizabeth, the mother, worked as a prostitute for her husband on the Independence Avenue in St. Louis. She remained unidentified for 7 years until her family members contacted authorities and reported Elizabeth and Cherie as missing persons. And the investigation into Cherie's disappearance, the daughter, began at that time. Cherie was apparently last seen in Kansas City, Missouri with Larry, the father, on January 7th of 1987. She disappeared from that location and has never been heard from again. Investigators located Larry in prison for armed robbery in the mid-1990s, and it says he will be incarcerated until at least 2028. Larry told authorities that he did know where his stepdaughter was located. This is his story, at least. He has stated that Cherie is, quote, being looked after by his family members and living under another name in the Kansas City area. She may not even know that she is a missing child. And at one point, Larry offered to give Elizabeth's mother, so Cherie's grandmother, photographs of Cherie and a recording of her voice if she paid him $500. That just infuriates me. But please let me know if you're watching the premiere, or let me know in chat. If you're watching replay, let me know in the comments what kind of, I'm just going to say it, what kind of scumbag would, oh yeah, I'll give you some pictures and a voice recording of your granddaughter if you give me $500. Anyway, so Cherie was supposed to remain in the custody of other relatives after her mother's passing, and due to the complexities in this case, Cherie's disappearance is classified as a non-family abduction. Although her stepfather claims to know her whereabouts, her case remains unsolved. So if you have any information regarding little Cherie, who was just 2 years old when she disappeared, she would be, what did I say, 39 years old today. Please contact the St. Louis Police Department at 314-444-5371. And I do have a little bit of additional information that I found on Cherie's case on the ourblackgirls.com website. Repeats some of the information, but then it expands on a little bit of what the father said. It says another cold case that has gone unsolved involves Elizabeth Turek Vassar and her daughter Cherie Barnes. According to reports, in 1986, 2-year-old Cherie was being cared for by her mother and stepfather, so it's the stepfather, Larry Vassar. That year, the trio reportedly moved from Nashville, Tennessee to St. Louis, Missouri. However, it would spell tragedy for the family. It was said that upon arriving in St. Louis, Elizabeth began working, as we said earlier, a street worker with her husband as her, we'll call him, manager. Then during the holiday season on December 1st, Elizabeth was reported missing. Her last known location was at her home, but it would take years to learn her fate. Although the remains of a woman were discovered in the Mississippi River 2 weeks after the mother vanished, as we said earlier, Elizabeth would not be identified for another 7 years. Meanwhile, relatives were also concerned about Cherie Barnes' whereabouts. Both Elizabeth and Cherie were listed as missing persons, but it was stated that the toddler was last seen with her stepfather, Larry Vassar, on January 7th, 1987. The exact location where the two were seen is unclear, yet it was noted that they were somewhere in Kansas City, Missouri, and Cherie Barnes has never been seen or heard from again. And it says the stepfather's version of events. Vassar was questioned by the authorities and told police that Cherie was, quote, being looked after by relatives. He also revealed that the little girl was given a new name and was somewhere in Kansas City. To prove his claim, Vassar offered to provide new photos of Cherie, but he would only do so if the elderly woman, Cherie's grandmother, gave him $500. Later, it was alleged that Vassar told his probation officer in 1988 that his wife was strangled in 1986. It was also speculated that a woman accused Vassar of Larry Vassar of attempting to kidnap her in 1987. The investigation into these claims are unknown. And it says if Cherie is still alive, there's a good chance she may not be aware of her past or know that she is a missing person. It says, once again, this case is listed as a non-family abduction, as Cherie was supposed to be given over to the custody of Elizabeth, her mother's mother, yet police have not ruled out what they say a darker fate. So once again, anybody with information on Cherie's case is urged to contact the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department at 314-231-1212. And it says, please share this story about Cherie Barnes to help reignite interest in her missing persons case. Absolutely. All right, guys, we made it through it. Sorry for all the interruptions, but between my cell signal and my cats running amok, it's a little bit chaotic, but thank you for watching. Thank you to everybody in chat who watched the premiere. Thank you to everybody watching the replay. Please give this a like before you leave. Leave a comment. Share. That is the most important thing you can do, is share it anywhere and everywhere you can to help this information about these missing reach as many people as possible. Take care of yourselves. Be careful out there. Take care of each other. That is the most important thing we can do, is take care of our fellow human beings. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.